remarkable is that AI, clearly from my perspective, is a technology. It's a built, constructed, non-living system. That makes it so confusing. It has qualities that we thought only humans,
Right,
living
exactly.
things, organisms, beings can have.
Right.
It learns,
Yep.
strange as it sounds, it learns on its own terms and its own ways.
In this episode, I speak with Tobias Rees, philosopher, anthropologist, and founder of LIM, ETH Zurich postdoc, and we're going to talk about what it means to be human in an age of AI and microbes. This is the We Are ETH podcast, and I'm Susan Kish, your host. Just to make sure that I understand, I have to say I read many of your writings and your interviews, and I got a little bit lost, right? As I was saying to my colleagues, between your use of concepts like historicity and related questions about sort of what it means to be human these days. But maybe I can just start by asking, one of your premises is that there's little doubt that two differentiations that stabilize the human, more than mere nature and more than mere machines, fail, and research is redefining the human in terms of things like microbiome research and climate change. What do you mean when you say redefine what a human means? How does that translate into something that I can understand and apply?
History of knowledge, right? So I basically had to reconstruct the brain came to be known and understood as an organ that grows during embryogenesis, and after birth the connectivity between the neurons continue to grow. We're maybe 15 or 16, and then there is a period of decline in connectivity because you form your main character and you choose a profession, etc. And then from 20 to old age, it's stable with a very modest tendency towards decline, which accounts for, old age dementia and something like that. And suddenly it was discovered that there are thousands and thousands of new nerve cells being born in adult brain. There was, like how we knew the brain, what the brain is, changed. It was reconceptualized and explained diseases of the brain.
How did we discover that? Why was that not known? I mean, our skin creates thousands of new cells. Why do we think the brain didn't?
Yes, very good question. And everybody asks that. And that's actually fascinating because at one point in time, it was so obvious that the brain does not renew because, it's the place where our memories are stored, where our personality is. There is a very straightforward story. There was a way of staining, dividing cells in embryos. So basically, you would see mitotic figure, mitosis, when a cell divides. And so people injected that stain in animals and aborted embryos and were just looking, if they could find anything. And they found mitotic figures in the whole body, basically, but not in the brain. They just couldn't find any in the brain. And so there was an Italian, Giuseppe Bizzozero, and a Spaniard, Ramon y Cajal, who basically authoritatively declared in the 1880s and 90s that all nerve cells, all neurons in the human brain are produced before birth. So humans are born with a definite number of neurons. And for about 15 years, that spelled the biggest scientific riddle. How can it be that a baby has such a small brain and an adult has such a big brain? And Cajal was the person basically who answered that question for decades by showing how the connectivity between nerve cells exploded after birth. Like it just, more and more. And the Germans invented a beautiful word for that, Dickenwachstum. So basically meaning it gets thicker, but there is no actual growth, to speak, on the level of neurons. And then in the 50s and in Montreal, in Canada, they redid these experiments with better markers, basically, for mitotic figures, and found the same. No new nerve cells in the brain. And so the common wisdom was the brain cannot afford new nerve cells or cellular turnover because that's where memories are stored, that's where our main character self is, and the rest of the body is renewing. And it was only in the late 1990s that it was discovered that there are two areas of the human brain where there are new nerve cells. the hippocampus and the microbiomes. But yeah, it led to a reconceptualization of how we understand the brain, how we understand how the brain functions, how we understand various diseases of the brain. And I was really interested in that, what the brain is and how it makes us human underwent a quite profound change within 5 or 10 years, became a different kind of thing from a fixed, immutable chemical structure to a living, biologically flourishing, organ.
Hmm.
And I was fascinated that nobody can say or tell they're a human being ends, and the microbiome of of that person, basically, or of that human begins.
Well, you write that from research in artificial intelligence to research in animal intelligence, en passant microbiome research or climate change.
Say, the human is a concept. That sounds very strange to people.
It
But
does.
after we talked
Totally
about
does.
the brain, yes, after we talked about the brain having been conceptualized as a fixed, immutable chemical organ for almost a century, and then being reconceptualized as a living, pulsing, constantly changing biological organ, we understand that what concepts are and what conceptualizations are, what the brain has been for us, been changing
Hmm.
quite rapidly. Once we have this example of the brain, I can go to the human and can say, strange as it sounds, our understanding of what it is to be human changed
Hmm.
dramatically. And today, most enlightened, reasonable people take it for granted that there is something like the human, something that all humans share, no matter when they were born, where they were born, no matter their sex or gender, no matter if they're old or young, the color of their skin, rich or poor. But such a general concept, universal notion of the human, not always existed. That's very, very strange. But if you go and read, let's say, Plato and Aristotle, they have these beautiful passages about what it means to be human, but they excluded 99% of humanity from the category human,
Oh, because there was only
right?
free men or whatever, people who weren't slaves. Is that it? And not women and
Yes,
things
in
like that?
fact, so every non-Greek was by definition possible slave, but why? Because they lacked the one thing that came in two forms that uh, made people human: reason. And actually, Plato and Aristotle both have two concepts of reason. One is noesis and one is dianoia. And let's translate dianoia as practical reason. Practical reason is given to artisans because heck, they need it, right? They make houses, they make beds, and so the cosmos gave them practical reason. And it's sort of reason that unfolds on the level of the concrete. When you
Hmm.
ask an artisan, Plato roughly goes about, what are you doing and why are you doing that? They look at you and they lack the capacity for abstract. They cannot think about thinking and sort of, articulate what they're doing. That kind of reason, noises, is only given to a very, very select few. And those select few can think about thinking, discover the eternal ideas that organize the cosmos, and watch over humans. And only those few who have noises are really human. And that's not a generic concept of the human, i.e., you're born and now you're human. That's a potential to become human. You have to live a certain lifestyle, and the importance of virtue and so on. And in ancient Rome, very little changed. The center of the world moved from Greece to Rome. The equestrians had the same sort of notion that only some can see basically the cosmic laws. And if you go to the Middle Ages and you go and see the scholastics, you have the same repetition. Only few can basically, our full gift of divine reason, can contemplate the cosmos, and the others have to ora et labora as it goes. And only turn from the 16th to the 17th century, early 17th century, is basically an explicit effort made to articulate a universal concept of the human. And that's in Europe, and the earliest examples are Descartes and Hobbes. And both of them are adamant that humans are different from animals or plants. Why? Because they have reason. And they're different from mere matter organized in terms of mechanism machines. And so the this is almost nobody pays attention to this, but if you read the first sentence of Descartes' Discourse on Method, published in 1637, he says, everybody is equally endowed with reason. If the way we understand the world differs, that's not because some have more reasons and others have less, because we take our reason along different paths. And so here I am writing the Discourse on Method, which will introduce you in the proper use of reason to see the light of truth. And that was a direct thought on the Aristotelian line, which continued to argue that only some have reason. And so only then does this modern notion of the human as more than nature and as other than machine emerge. And so this conceptualization of humans basically was simultaneously a massive, beautiful achievement because it was the first time that universality and hence equality and justice became thinkable. And from today's perspective, it also has so many unfortunate sides because we are not more than
Mhm.
nature. The question whether we are different from machines is unclear. And they're like if I make a list of reasons why the modern notion of the human as more than nature and other than machine is problematic, and I come to climate change. We are more than nature. Nature is just a resource. We can control it technically. Well, that turned out to be a really bad idea, and come to the microbiome. It's a more positive story. Climate change is more a negative story, but the microbiome basically says more than nature. There's no clear separation between our inside and the microbial environment on the outside that we live. It's sort of continuous. We're a piece of biology microbially rooted, among other pieces of biology microbially rooted. And AI,
Uh-huh.
much, much more difficult to like AI than to like microbes.
Right.
But AI, at the very least, puts a question mark on the once very obvious claim that humans and machines are radically different things because AI can do some of the things we thought only.
Do you think that, given the pace with which AI has exploded in its capacity, maybe that's the term I want to use, in the last 4 years or 3 years since ChatGPT burst through the common consciousness, are we thinking that being human will be a term that will apply to the robots of the future, which theoretically will encompass a huge amount of the AI?
No, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make a set of distinctions. So we have human on the one hand and technology on the other. Underneath human, we write organism, and under technology, we write machine. Under organism, we write living, alive, growth, and under machine, we write non-living or dead. And instead of growth, we write constructed or built. And
Or
then
iterative?
underneath that, let's say, or iterative, yes. So we could say basically growth capable of newness, machine, eternal repetition of the same. We could then sort of summarize these two groups as beings versus things. And so, what makes AI philosophically, I think, and anthropologically very, very curious and remarkable is that AI, clearly, from my perspective, is a technology. It's a built, constructed, non living system.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it so confusing. It has qualities that we thought only humans, living things, organisms, beings can have. It learns, as strange as it sounds, it learns on its own terms and its own ways. And it builds little models of the world, if you will, like the statistical representations. It acts in its own terms, the terms that it has learned, and speak. It has a rudimentary, nascent capability of distinguishing true from false. It seems to have most basic creative capabilities. How can that be? Well, it's because of these capabilities that people are scared, I think, because it looks like AI sort of magically jumped from the category machine and thing into the category living thing human. but it's not human. It is a machine. So I think what we have to learn to see is that AI is an in-between thing. It exists in between both the two categories, human technology, organism, machine being thing. And it leads us into an in-between world where many of the things that we thought cannot have agency, cannot participate in those qualities that we thought only humans can have, maybe can participate in those qualities.
That was a great conversation, and I also really appreciated your context in terms of the work that you do, your definition of things like field work in a contemporary setting, and your articulation of where we might find ourselves in terms of these questions in the just beyond the horizon time frame, which I think sounds like that's part of what you look at and think about.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually just finished one book manuscript yesterday called
Congrats.
The Human, an essay in philosophical discontinuity. And the second one is almost done. It's called Philosophy in the Wild, an Introduction to the Invisible. So they will soon come out and hopefully make my work more legible. But when I left the university, then also left the Berkman Institute, and I began working for not as a consultant, because what do I have in terms of expertise, but as a philosophical interlocutor with the CEOs and CTOs of these big tech companies. My livelihood became dependent on my invisibility. The less people knew about me, the less visible I was to a general public, the more secure the conversations I had with these famous people could be.
So, Tobias, I'd love to close with some standard questions we ask our guests, which start with when you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Grew up in a tiny Swabian peasant village and grew up with my grandparents. And the idea that there is something that you have to be when you're adult did not exist. Nobody ever asked me. The question never occurred to me. I was sitting on top of the chicken stable underneath an elderflower tree and watched the clouds go by. No concept of adulthood or job. First time this occurred to me was when I had to pick subjects for the university.
Completely fair.
And I still refuse to have a job, right?
You may not have a job, but you certainly have a path.
Right. And the older I get, the more I can see, some form of trajectory, I guess.
What are the books that you're reading?
There's the famous book by Susan Simard that everybody knows, but right now I'm deep into Harriet Ricks, The Genius of Trees, how they mastered the elements and shaped the world, right here.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so that's where I am. But pathetic as it sounds, I read every day some passages in Greek from Aristotle or Plato, literally every day. It is a form of grounding, a form of trajectory that begins there.
So you mentioned your short clips and this really impressive growth on Instagram and on YouTube's. Are there any short clips or podcasts that you listen to that you recommend that inspired you to do what you're doing?
Yeah. I go on long runs or walks every day, and so with no podcasts, no happiness. There are a couple I listen to every day, and so there is Possible by Reid Hoffman and Aria Finger. I like Read Riffs the most. There is a podcast by Sarah Guo and I'm Gil. No Priors, it's called. Sometimes listen to Tetragrammaton by Rick Rubin. Usually listen to Ezra Klein if there's a new episode, and the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung and the Zeit Literature podcast.
Very cool. And then finally, where's your favorite place to have a coffee in Zurich?
Bellevue.
Bellevue. Do you like the place in the middle of Bellevue, in that triangle in the middle where all the trams go around, or where in Bellevue?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean that's when I first moved to Zurich, having read pretty much everything that Dürrenmatt and Frisch had written. I knew that that's one of the places where they had coffee, so it was a mythical place to begin with. And so I went there in the mornings having my coffee. It's very different now from what it was like 20 years ago, or it feels different. 20 years ago, you still basically saw men who seemed to have dressed up, you know, and went there to read a newspaper, and now that's no longer the case.
And would have furled umbrellas, right? And you looked
Yes,
across to the
exactly.
field. So Tobias, thank you so much. Thank you for making the time. I know it's early for you, but we appreciate it.
I'm so grateful that you had me on the podcast. Thanks for the awesome conversation.
Thank you. I'm Susan Kish, host of the We Are ETH series, telling the stories of the alumni and friends of the ETH Zurich. That's the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. ETH regularly ranks amongst the top universities in the world with cutting-edge research, science, and their people. The people who were there, are there, and will be there. The We Are ETH series tells their stories. Please subscribe to this podcast and join us wherever you listen. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, give us a good rating on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. I'd like to close by thanking our producers at ETH Alumni and LE Media, and especially to thank you, our listeners, for joining us.